Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we're going microscopic. We're exploring the incredible world of nerves.
Yeah, we've got Dr. Rasha Eldeeb's Physiology handout on nerve structure and function to help us with this.
Oh, yeah. That's going to be really useful.
Get ready to unravel the mysteries of how these tiny wonders,
Yeah.
make you, well, you.
Right. They're so tiny, but so important.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin with something this complex?
It all starts with the neuron. Think
Yeah.
of it as the fundamental building block
Okay.
of your entire nervous system.
So like a single brick in a massive complex structure.
You got it. That impressive building is your nervous system. It's a vast communication network. It spans your entire body.
Wow. And just like a building needs different types of materials, our nervous system relies on different types of neurons.
Right. To do its job.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are some of these neuron varieties? What makes them unique?
Well, one way to classify neurons is by their structure.
Okay.
Some neurons have a single process extending from their cell body, while others have two or even many.
Okay.
These processes are like arms reaching out,
Okay.
connecting neurons and allowing them to communicate.
So more processes mean more connections, like a social butterfly of the neuron world.
Haha. That's one way to think about it.
Hmm.
Another key difference is myelination.
Right.
Some neurons are wrapped in a fatty substance called myelin,
Yeah.
which acts like insulation around an electrical wire.
The myelin sheath. I remember that from biology class. It helps speed up those nerve signals.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting. The cells that make the myelin sheath, well, they're different in the central nervous system.
Which is our brain and spinal cord.
Right. Compared to the rest of your body.
The peripheral nervous system.
You got it.
So our bodies have different myelin-making crews, depending on the location, like having specialized construction teams for different parts of the city.
Yeah.
What's the advantage of that?
Well, the different myelin-producing cells reflect the unique demands of each part of the nervous system. The brain, with its constant rapid-fire communication,
Mm-hmm.
it might need a slightly different type of insulation than, say, the nerves in your toes.
Makes sense. So we've got these different types of neurons, all specialized, but how do they actually do their job? Transmitting information throughout the body. What makes them so good at it?
Neurons have three key properties that make them expert communicators: excitability, conductivity, and infatigability.
Okay, let's break those down one by one.
Sure. Excitability means they're incredibly responsive to changes around them.
So they're like tiny sensors, picking up on everything happening inside and outside the body.
Exactly. Imagine them as sentinels, constantly monitoring for any changes in temperature, pressure, or chemical signals.
Wow, that's amazing. What about conductivity?
Conductivity. This refers to a neuron's ability to transmit those signals, but quickly and efficiently over long distances.
Like a high-speed rail network for information, zipping throughout the body.
Perfect analogy. And finally, we have infatigability.
Okay.
This means our neurons are tireless workers, constantly sending and receiving signals without getting tired.
Wow, that's incredible.
Imagine them as the ultimate multitaskers, never needing a coffee break.
It's incredible how much work they do without us even realizing it. So we've got these amazing signal-carrying neurons, always on alert, but what actually gets them to fire off a message?
That's where stimuli come in. Stimuli are the triggers.
Okay.
They get those neurons excited and ready to send a signal.
So stimuli are like the on switch for our neurons. What are some examples?
Well, think about touching a hot stove. That sudden temperature change,
Yeah.
that's a thermal stimulus that activates pain receptors in your skin.
Ouch. I can feel that just thinking about it. What about something less painful? Something more everyday?
A gentle breeze on your skin is an example of a mechanical stimulus. It's activating different receptors that sense pressure and movement.
Oh.
Or think about the delicious aroma of freshly baked cookies.
Oh.
Those scent molecules, they're chemical stimuli activating receptors in your nose.
Cookies. Suddenly, learning about nerves is a lot more appealing. So we've got thermal, mechanical, and chemical stimuli, a whole sensory buffet for our neurons.
Exactly.
But what happens once a stimulus triggers a neuron? How does that signal actually travel?
That's where the all-or-nothing law comes in. Neurons are like light switches. They're either fully on or fully off.
Interesting.
When a stimulus reaches a certain threshold, it triggers a full-blown nerve impulse called action potential. If the stimulus isn't strong enough, nothing happens. There's no in-between.
So it's like a tipping point. The stimulus has to reach a certain level to get the neuron to fire.
Precisely. And that action potential, the nerve impulse,
Yeah.
is a wave of electrical activity that travels down the neuron, carrying the signal to its destination. It's a remarkably efficient system, allowing information to travel quickly and reliably throughout the body.
This is all so fascinating. I'm curious, though. What's driving that electrical wave? It sounds kind of mysterious.
It all comes down to a delicate dance of charged particles called ions moving across the neuron's membrane.
Okay.
The neuron maintains a difference in electrical charge between its inside and outside, like a tiny battery storing potential energy.
A battery inside each neuron? That's wild.
It is, and when a stimulus triggers an action potential, that battery discharges,
Oh, wow.
creating a rapid flow of ions across the membrane. This flow of ions is what generates the electrical wave that propagates down the neuron.
So it's like a domino effect. Once the first domino falls, the rest follow in a chain reaction.
Exactly. The movement of ions during an action potential creates a self-propagating wave of electrical activity.
Yeah.
It travels down the neuron with incredible speed and precision.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. So we've got these tiny batteries inside our neurons, and when they're triggered by a strong enough stimulus, they unleash a cascade of electrical activity carrying signals throughout the body at lightning speed. It's like a microscopic electrical symphony happening inside us all the time.
You're catching on quickly.
Yeah.
And just when you think it can't get any more complex, we have to consider the factors that influence how easily a neuron fires.
Wait, so a neuron's excitability isn't always the same. What can change it?
Oh, many things. Temperature, pressure, blood supply, oxygen levels. Even the pH and electrolyte balance of the surrounding environment can affect how easily a neuron responds to a stimulus. It's a delicate balance, a bit like keeping a sensitive instrument finely tuned.
Wow. So the environment surrounding a neuron plays a crucial role in its ability to function properly.
Absolutely. And this sensitivity to external factors highlights just how interconnected our bodies truly are. Everything from the air we breathe to the food we eat can impact the health and function of our nervous systems.
It's incredible to think about all the intricate processes happening at the microscopic level to keep everything running smoothly. It makes you appreciate the complexity of the human body in a whole new way.
It certainly does. And we've only just scratched the surface of this fascinating world.
I'm already hooked. Listeners, stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive deeper into these factors that influence nerve excitability and explore how they impact our overall health and well-being. Welcome back, listeners. Last time, we left off talking about how a neuron's environment can affect its ability to fire.
Right.
I'm ready to unpack this idea further. What are some specific examples of how this plays out in our bodies?
Let's start with temperature. Ever notice how your hands feel clumsy and numb when they're cold?
Oh yeah, all the time.
That's because cold temperatures actually slow down the speed at which nerve impulses travel.
Ah, so that's why I can barely text when my fingers are freezing. It's like the signals are stuck in traffic. So
Yeah.
warmth would have the opposite effect.
Exactly. Warmth tends to speed things up, making those nerve impulses zip along more efficiently. It's one reason why we might feel more alert and responsive when we're comfortably warm.
That makes a lot of sense. What about pressure? We've all had that experience of sitting on our foot for too long and getting that pins and needles feeling.
Right. That's a perfect example of pressure impacting nerve function. When you sit like that, you're compressing the nerves. You're restricting blood flow and essentially putting them to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
That tingling you feel when you move your foot is the blood rushing back in and the nerves waking up.
So it's temporary in that case, but I imagine prolonged pressure could have more lasting effects.
You're right. Chronic or excessive pressure on a nerve can actually cause damage and impair its ability to function properly. Think about conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome, where repetitive motions can compress nerves in the wrist,
Yeah.
leading to pain, numbness, and weakness in the hand.
It's a good reminder to take breaks and stretch, especially if you're doing something repetitive with your hands for a long time.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about blood supply. Nerves, like any other cells in our bodies, need a steady stream of oxygen and nutrients to function properly.
So if the blood flow to a nerve is restricted, that's bad news.
It can be. Conditions like peripheral artery disease, where narrowed arteries restrict blood flow to the limbs, can lead to nerve damage and a whole host of problems, from pain and numbness to difficulty walking.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is in the body. Our circulatory system, our nervous system, they're all working together.
Exactly. And speaking of interconnectedness, let's not forget about oxygen. Nerves are energy-hungry cells, and they need a constant supply of oxygen to generate those electrical impulses that keep us going.
Okay, so if we're not breathing properly, or if we have a condition that affects our oxygen levels, that could spell trouble for our nerves.
That's right. Think about conditions like sleep apnea, where people experience pauses in breathing during sleep. Over time, this chronic oxygen deprivation can damage nerves and lead to a range of symptoms.
It's powerful reminder to prioritize good sleep and respiratory health.
Absolutely. Now let's get a little more technical. Let's talk about pH. This refers to the acidity or alkalinity of the environment surrounding our nerves. Our bodies work hard to maintain a very specific pH balance because even slight deviations can throw off nerve function.
So too much acidity or too much alkalinity can disrupt the delicate balance needed for our nerves to fire properly.
Exactly. For example, in conditions like diabetic ketoacidosis, where the body becomes too acidic, nerve function can be disrupted, leading to a range of complications.
Wow, it's incredible how sensitive our nerves are to these subtle shifts in our internal environment.
It really is. And last but not least, let's talk about electrolytes. These are minerals that carry an electrical charge when dissolved in fluids,
Okay.
and they're absolutely essential for nerve function.
So we're talking about things like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, those essential minerals we always hear about.
Exactly. These electrolytes play a key role in regulating the flow of those charged particles across the neuron's membrane,
Yeah.
which is what drives those electrical impulses.
So if our electrolyte balance is off, our nerve signals could get scrambled.
That's the gist of it. For example, low levels of calcium can make nerves overly excitable, leading to muscle cramps or spasms. And high levels of potassium can disrupt the heart's electrical activity, which can be life-threatening.
That's scary. It's a good reminder to stay hydrated and pay attention to our electrolyte intake, especially if we're sweating a lot or if we have any health conditions.
That's a great point. When we consider all these factors, temperature, pressure, blood flow, oxygen, pH, electrolytes, it paints a picture of how intricate and interconnected our bodies truly are.
Right.
Our nerves depend on this delicate balance to function properly.
It's like a perfectly choreographed dance with all these different systems working together to create the symphony of our lives.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And just like any well-rehearsed performance, it takes effort to keep everything running smoothly. Our lifestyle choices play a huge role in the health of our nervous system.
So things like getting enough sleep, managing stress, eating a nutritious diet, and staying active, these aren't just good for our overall health, but they're directly impacting the well-being of our nerves as well.
Absolutely. When we prioritize these healthy habits, we're essentially creating an optimal environment for our nervous system to thrive.
It's empowering to know we have some control over the health of our nervous system. It's not just about genetics or luck. Our daily choices can make a real difference.
That's a powerful insight. And now, since we've explored these internal factors that influence nerve excitability, are you ready to dive into how our nerves actually translate the signals they receive into tangible sensations?
Absolutely. I'm eager to learn how we experience the world through our nerves. Let's unravel the mysteries of touch, temperature, smell, and taste. Welcome back, listeners. We've been on quite a journey through the world of nerves.
We have, from their basic structure to the factors that influence their excitability.
Right. Now, I'm curious about the sensory side of things. How do our nerves translate all those signals they're receiving into the sensations we experience every day?
It's a fascinating process. It involves a complex interplay between our senses, our nerves, and our brain. Think of it like a relay race, with sensory nerves acting as the runners, carrying information from the outside world to the central nervous system.
Okay, so the sensory nerves pick up the signal, but what happens next? Who's waiting at a finish line?
That would be our brain. It's the command center.
Okay.
It receives those signals, processes them, and ultimately interprets them as specific sensations.
So the brain is like the coach, analyzing the incoming data
Yeah.
and deciding on the best course of action.
Exactly. And that course of action can involve sending signals back out
Okay.
through motor nerves, telling our muscles how to respond.
So it's a two-way street. Sensory nerves bring in the information, the brain processes it, and then motor nerves send out instructions, triggering a response. It's a beautifully coordinated system.
It is. Let's take an example. Imagine you're walking barefoot and you step on a sharp pebble.
Ouch.
Sensory receptors in your foot detect that sharp pressure and immediately send a signal up through sensory nerves to your brain.
Ouch. I can feel that just imagining it.
Your brain quickly analyzes that signal. It recognizes it as pain
Yeah.
and decides on a response. Lift your foot.
Right.
It sends signals down through motor nerves to the muscles in your leg, instructing them to contract, lifting your foot away from the source of pain.
Wow, that whole process happens in a fraction of a second. We don't even have to think about it consciously.
Right.
It's incredible how our nerves are working tirelessly to protect us.
It really is a remarkable system. And it's not just about responding to pain. This interplay between sensory input, brain processing, and motor output, that's happening constantly. It allows us to navigate our world, interact with objects, and experience a whole range of sensations.
Okay, so let's dive into those specific sensations. How do our nerves help us experience touch, temperature, smell, and taste?
Well, each of these senses relies on specialized sensory receptors that are designed to detect specific types of stimuli. Think of them like tiny antennas, each tuned to pick up a particular signal.
So we have different receptors for different sensations.
Exactly. For example, in our skin, we have thermoreceptors that are sensitive to changes in temperature.
Okay.
Some thermoreceptors are activated by warmth, while others are activated by cold.
So when I touch a hot cup of coffee, it's those warmth-sensing thermoreceptors sending signals to my brain that tell me, hey, this is hot.
Exactly. And the more those receptors are stimulated, the hotter the object will feel. Interestingly, the number of thermoreceptors varies depending on the location on the body.
So some areas are more sensitive to temperature changes than others.
That's right. Our fingertips, for example, have a much higher density of thermoreceptors than, say, our backs.
Okay.
This makes sense because our fingertips are our primary tools for exploring the world through touch.
It's like our bodies have evolved to prioritize sensitivity in the areas where we need it most. What about touch? How do our nerves help us distinguish between a gentle caress and a firm handshake?
Our skin is also packed with mechanoreceptors, which are sensitive to mechanical pressure and movement.
Mm-hmm.
We have different types of mechanoreceptors, each specialized to detect a particular range of pressure or vibration.
So we have some receptors for light touch, others for deep pressure, and still others for vibration. It's like having a whole toolkit for experiencing the world through touch.
That's a great way to put it. For example, we have receptors called Meissner's corpuscles. They're highly sensitive to light touch and vibrations, particularly in hairless skin like our fingertips and lips. These receptors help us appreciate the subtle textures of a silk scarf or the gentle flutter of a butterfly's wings.
And then we have those Pacinian corpuscles,
Oh.
which are deeper in the skin
Yeah.
and respond to deep pressure and vibrations. I'm guessing those are the ones that let me feel a firm handshake or the rumble of a passing truck.
Exactly. And then there are Merkel cells, which provide information about sustained pressure and texture. They help us feel the weight of a book in our hand, or distinguish between a smooth, polished stone and a rough, jagged rock.
It's amazing how our nervous system allows us to experience such a wide range of tactile sensations.
It is. And we can't forget about those hair follicle receptors, which are wrapped around the base of our hair follicles and are incredibly sensitive to light touch and the movement of hairs.
Ah, so those are the ones that make me swat away a fly when it lands on my arm.
Exactly. They're also responsible for that pleasant feeling we get when someone gently strokes our hair.
It's fascinating how something as simple as the movement of a hair can trigger such a complex cascade of events in our nervous system, leading to a specific sensation.
It really highlights the incredible sensitivity and precision of our nerves.
So we've covered touch and temperature. What about our chemical senses? Smell and taste.
Right.
How do our nerves help us experience those?
Those senses rely on chemoreceptors, which are specialized receptors that detect specific molecules.
Okay.
Our sense of smell, or olfaction, relies on olfactory receptor neurons. They're located high up in our nasal cavity.
So when we inhale, those scent molecules in the air bind to these receptors, triggering signals that travel to our brain, which then interprets them as specific smells.
Exactly. And we have hundreds of different types of olfactory receptor neurons, each sensitive to a particular range of odor molecules. This allows us to perceive an incredible diversity of smells, from the sweet fragrance of flowers to the pungent aroma of spices.
It's amazing how our sense of smell can evoke such vivid memories and emotions.
It truly is. Now, our sense of taste, or gustation, relies on taste receptor cells, located in our taste buds, those tiny bumps on our tongues.
And we have different types of taste receptor cells, each sensitive to a specific taste. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and umami.
Exactly. When we eat something, the molecules in the food dissolve in our saliva and bind to those taste receptors, triggering signals that travel to our brain, where they're interpreted as those familiar tastes.
It's fascinating how our senses of smell and taste work together to create the complex flavors we experience. And it's not just about pleasure. These senses also help us detect potential dangers, like spoiled food or harmful substances.
You're absolutely right. Our senses are not just about enjoyment. They're essential for our survival.
Wow, this has been an incredible journey. We've explored the intricate structure of nerves, the factors that influence their excitability, and the amazing ways they translate sensory information into the sensations we experience.
We've seen how our nerves allow us to interact with our environment, protect us from harm, and experience the richness of the world around us.
It's been a truly mind-blowing exploration. I think the biggest takeaway for me is just how intricate and interconnected our bodies are. Our nervous system is a true marvel of nature, a complex symphony of signals and responses that keeps us functioning every second of every day.
I couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage our listeners to take a moment to appreciate the incredible power of their own nervous systems. Pay attention to the sensations you experience, the movements you make, and the seamless coordination of your body's many systems. It's a testament to the remarkable network of nerves that makes you, well, you.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey, listeners. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those nerves firing.